So, what we're talking about today, go ahead.
Yeah, so our title today is Describe, Not Define. And our theme of the month is looking at this idea of the divine feminine in all. And as Reverend Sunny and I were chatting about this, it's like, it's interesting because there's so many things wrapped up in this idea of the divine feminine. Even when you just hear that word, you associate it with a female, right? And so we have all these different things such as gender and sex, and then sexuality, and then this divine aspects of life and being. So we're going to kind of break all that down today in a way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to start by talking a little bit about these different ways that we can define ourselves, and or we can describe ourselves, yet we don't want to be defined by these labels. And it's important to understand the distinction between what these different words mean. So that's what we're going to start with today. So these words are meant to describe us, but not define us. So we have these words regarding gender, such as male, female, girl, boy, woman, man. So child, parent, yeah. So all these different labels, all these different things here. So first I want to talk about this idea that gender is really in the mind. It's our understanding of ourselves. So there's our gender identity, which is here. And then our gender expression is maybe how we express through our clothes, jewelry, if we choose makeup. All those are ways that we express our gender identity, which is that kind of felt sense of ourselves on this spectrum of gender. And then it's different from sex. So we have these sexual organs. So we may be born with certain sexual organs that are identified as male or female. And what we're looking to is stretch beyond this binary thinking of male, female equals man, woman, or boy, girl, and look beyond that kind of binary thinking and understand the difference between gender and a physical sex. Because there are also people in the world that experience their gender as non-binary. So meaning on the spectrum, fluid, gender queer, gender fluid, not male, man, or woman. And it's different than what perhaps physical parts there may be. So we're breaking this all down in a way, and hopefully you're following it, and we'll keep doing it. But another thing that I think it's important to know is that all this talk about our physical sex or our gender, it's on a spectrum, and it's like a separate line on the spectrum from sexuality. And often all those get kind of mixed together. You think you could look at someone and tell what their gender is and tell what their sexual orientation is. So we want to bust that myth, because though we can't look and know, we're busting it, right? Busting it. So I'll use myself as an example on these different terms. So I am a female. That's what my body parts are. We're getting real intimate today.
You're starting to scare me.
I am female. And I am...
Me too.
Yes. And I am cisgender. So what that means, the word cis means same. So I identify, my gender is the same as my physical sex. So I identify as a woman in a female body. So that means I'm cisgender. Following along so far? And then my sexual orientation is a separate thing, right? Just because I am female and this doesn't indicate what my sexual orientation is going to be. So for me, my sexual orientation, I identify as queer. I previously identified as pansexual. So what pansexual means is it's this spectrum of I'm open to fall in love with the person, no matter the gender. So it's different than bisexual. Bi is still binary. People that might identify as bisexual might be physically, romantically, sexually attracted to men and women, right? That's the bi, or pan is more inclusive of this spectrum. And then queer also is more inclusive of the umbrella of the spectrum of sexuality and gender as well. So I just like the word queer because it's just more open. But the thing is also, I chose to spend my life and married a woman. So on the outside world, the label that a lot of people see us as is lesbian. And I'm okay with that too. It's not personally the word that feels exactly right for me, but it also, it describes me, but it doesn't define me, and it doesn't offend me if you were to use that word or term. But that's often by looking at who I am and what my relation is, that's often the label, the term that is used to describe me. So breaking all that down, I thought the best way was just to use an example of myself and to know then again that there's all these different stereotypes that come with each of these things of gender and sex and sexual orientation. And that doesn't define who I am. I get to say, I get to choose, only I know who I am and how I express in the world. And I think it's so wonderful, all these different ways we get to show up and be expressed in this world, because it really is showing the uniqueness, the creativity of this thing called life, expressing through all of humanity in numerous ways. Want to add to that?
Wow. I really know who you are now.
Do you feel like you know me now?
I know you now. I love the idea that we don't want to define each other, because part of this whole thing that we're talking about today, this subject, is about how nature versus nurture. Oh, thank you. I just love that. Just people taking care of people. Just move that thing around. Nature versus nurture, and I made some notes on it. Right. So, some people argue that everything we are is based on what's in our genes, and we come into the world largely as who we will always be. That's one argument, and that our nature is unchangeable. At the other extreme, people argue that we come into the world as blank slates, and only nurture, or the way we are brought up, matters, which is really interesting, because one of the things I find fascinating with you and I and the way we work together is you were brought up completely different. Your life was different than my life. And, even though we have similar paths and we are similar people, I experienced a different set of rules, from my parents. The truth about all of this, about nature versus nurture, is that it's probably somewhere in the middle. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. So what we know is that even some of those things we think are nature, like the differences between those who identify as female and those who identify as male, are actually nurture. For example, let me give you an example of this. Let me break it down a little bit.
Break it down.
Break it down. Many studies have shown that people treat newborns differently based on whether they believe that the baby is a male or a female. Researchers, and this has been going on for years, researchers all over the world have taken a newborn and dressed it in either blue or pink, the same baby doing the same things, but the baby's actions are interpreted differently depending on what sex the people who are observing think the baby is. Isn't that interesting? So similar experiments have been conducted with toddlers with the same results. So one toddler is videotaped wearing clothes that are sex neutral. People are then invited to watch the video, and some people are told the toddler is a boy, and some people are told that the toddler is a girl, right? follow me so far? So the difference is not in the children themselves, but in the perception of the people viewing the children. Their perceptions are based on cultural learning. For example, when a child was speaking loudly, people who thought it was a boy thought he was being adventurous, and it showed intelligence, right? So when people thought it was a girl, they thought she was misbehaving and unruly. Same child, same activity. So it's interesting how we, all of this starts as babies. How we're culturally brought up to view things. Like, for example, boys don't cry, right? Boys don't cry. Girls don't show anger. Boys are good at math. Girls are good at English, right? You follow me? One of the things that I appreciate so much about our governor, for example, Bashir, and also Governor Cuomo, is that they are nurturing as well as, giving factual information and saying, this is what we need to do. Every day, Governor Bashir is doing press. He's talking to the press. He's talking to all of us. Not only is he doing it for all of us, but he's also giving information and holding it for children.
I saw that.
Yes,
that was so sweet.
He's explaining it. Yeah. He's having special time with children to explain exactly what's going on. That's nurturing. That is the what we call the feminine divine or whatever. And I don't even like that phrase, because I think that we, as soon as I say that, we have an impression. We start defining it.
As soon as you say it, you immediately picture a female body.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not necessarily a female body.
Yeah.
It's we all have this thing that we call the feminine divine and the masculine divine, and we're just people. We're simply people. So I think it's fascinating when we say describe but not define. I don't want you to define me. You can describe me any way you want. Well, mostly any way you want, but don't define me, because like you said before, I know who I am. You really don't know who I am.
And when I think about it, if somebody were, to describe me, really that's on them. How they describe me says more about them than it does about me.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And only I can define for myself who I am.
Right. It's more about how they have been raised and what they've been taught. And, look at the differences about what's going on right now in the world with this virus, and how some people are taking it very seriously. Right. And then some people are not taking it seriously at all. I mean, I saw, and I'm not trying to diss anybody, but in Florida on spring break, all of these young college students out there just having a ball, saying, if I get it, I get it. If I die, I die. And it's interesting to me because it's not about them.
Right.
It's about who you're exposing it to. So the me generation, or, it's about me, it's me, is not working for this virus.
And I think
what do you think?
I agree. And I think that it's that 20-something age group, though, that is kind of on track with the mentality of that age group. I mean, if we all think about when we were 20, we feel invincible. Our world really is more cognitively about ourselves. Yet, if that continues, and that continues in our systems and our structures of the world, it doesn't work. This idea of it all being about me and not taking into consideration the collective and who we're affecting, that's when things really start to break down and just doesn't work.
Yeah, and on the other side of that, there's neighbors helping neighbors, and
Yes.
I'm seeing neighborhood gatherings where everybody has their chair 6 feet apart, and they're all talking and
Yeah.
calling their older neighbors and checking on them, and I myself have been calling people and checking on people in our community, not only to stay connected, but a caring heart.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting what's happening. I'm going to ask the question, if anybody has a question that is watching our broadcast, or a thought about all of that, please to just type it in, and Heather or Louise will give us the thought or the message or the question, because this is an interactive service. So please feel free to interact if you have anything that you want to say about all of that.
Yeah, and something you just said, when you said some people are taking it seriously and some aren't. I took a moment, I thought of this word seriously, and I would love to think about how we could actually not take it seriously, but yet take it responsibly in a way, right?
Beautiful.
So it's like being playful with what's occurring still, so that we don't feel like the burden of the world is upon us. We can still experience it with a kind of a lightness, but that doesn't mean a disregard or an irregard, right? So, we are wiping the microphones, and we are doing our best to stay 6 feet apart and only having 10 people in the room. So that is being responsible, but we're still having fun. We showed up this morning and had a little spontaneous dance party. We were singing in here. We still prayed in, but we made sure we were separated across the room. And
here comes Louise.
Uh-oh. How we doing, Louise? Okay, we're good. Thanks.
We're 6 feet apart. Yay!
It's just like there's just this magnetic energy, though. Sometimes we just get pulled together, but we got to resist. We got to, keep our distance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stay safe, stay mindful. Yeah, so I think it's about being mindful and being responsible, but, still having a lightness about it, but not a total disregard.
How are you feeling being like not being able to just go and do? And, and let me piggyback on that before you answer. It was interesting because the speed limit on the 110 in California a month ago at rush hour was like 25 miles an hour, and now it's 60.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's less smog, and so there are. And we have a question. Or a comment?
We do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the best way to recognize and honor the divine feminine and what is happening with regard to the virus in our everyday lives?
Say that again.
Okay.
Say it slowly so I can repeat it.
What is the best way to recognize?
What is the best way to recognize
and honor the divine
and
feminine?
honor the divine feminine and what is happening with regard to the virus in our everyday lives? Well, I think really what we just talked about is checking on your neighbors, and people that you really care about. Do you have some ideas?
Yeah, the word nurturing was coming to mind too.
Yeah.
So the divine feminine is described as that nurturing presence. It's also described as that kind of creative, inspired presence. So another thing is using this time to get creative. And that's what I've been noticing. All the creative offerings that are coming online and people sharing their gifts and like, okay, I can't meet with someone in person, but how can I still connect with someone? How can I still express my talent? So there's been a number of concerts online. I know Centers for Spiritual Living is hosting those couch concerts. One was last night, I believe. And it's so fun to go online and experience that sense of connection, of love, and creativity in new ways. And for all the parents that are home with their children, that are used to having their children be away at school, that's calling on a great sense of creativity.
Oh boy.
And innovation to be with our little ones, and to be that nurturing presence at the same time as that creative presence. We got another question. Pansexual and bisexual,
The
yes.
difference.
Reverend Soni?
No. No.
Yeah, so pansexual, my understanding of the word, it means more like all. So gender is a spectrum, right? And so on one end of the spectrum is male or man, and the other one is woman. And so being sexually and emotionally and physically attracted to someone anywhere on that spectrum, so it's more inclusive of people that identify as trans or non-binary, that is pansexual. Bisexual, and again, the term bisexual came about before we even had these terms or understanding about gender being on a spectrum. Bisexual was being physically, romantically, emotionally attracted to someone when we understood gender as a binary of male or female, man or woman. So someone bisexual would be then attracted to a man or a woman. And pansexual is just more inclusive of someone that may fall in that spectrum of non-binary or trans.
Very good.
Clear?
Yeah, it was clear to me. And,
okay.
Sometimes it takes a lot of explaining for me, but I got that.
And there's just so many new words every day. The
Every day.
LGBTQI plus alphabet expands. And so it's fun to kind of keep our pulse on it with the younger generation that are coming up. And I think that's another way of expressing creativity and how we express in the world and understanding these different ways of being in the world. So,
that reminds me of, growing up, how boys were not allowed to play with dolls. And if they did, it had to be something like a G.I. Joe. Right. Because I just wonder if we were to allow that or to explore the idea of letting a child be who they want to be, how that would show up in the world, because we have so much prejudice towards individuals who don't fit in what society calls the norm. So many people. And what would it be like just to simply let people be who they are and celebrate that, instead of, saying you have to be this way or that way? I think we have another question back there.
So we'll go with Louise and then to Heather. I would love to hear more on personally evolving to transform mass, to do more to transform mass consciousness. Okay.
Gosh, I think we're doing it right now.
Yeah. Just even these conversations.
Here's the thing, and it's not only in society and culture and, the political arena. We have forgotten how to have conversations with one another without wanting and having to be right.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, exactly. What if we just have conversations where we listen to each other? And, if you break all of that down, the one thing that we have in common, I believe, is that we all want to be loved. And we want to be accepted for who we are.
And seen and acknowledged the ways we express.
Yes, absolutely. Uniquely. So how about if we just have a conversation of, let me explain to you why I look at the world this way, or why I feel this way, what it's like for me when someone says, you're an abomination. What does that feel like? So having conversations and really listening to people without, you ever notice when you're talking to someone and they're like, I can't get too close to you, and they're like, you can see them trying to formulate their response before they've even heard the end of your sentence.
It's like you can tell the moment they kind of check out.
Right.
If you're really perceptive in a conversation, and I know I do it sometimes too. I one thing triggers me. I go in my head. I'm in my own story, and I'm coming up with a response and taking that breath to even acknowledge that's occurring, and then coming back to the real listening.
It's the same thing as if you're in one room and someone else is in another, and you're on your computer and they're talking to you, and the person on the computer is going, yeah, like you're trying to, oh yes, I'm really listening to you, but really you're not.
Yep.
And this whole thing about multitasking, it doesn't work. It does not work. I mean, not if you really, really, really want to hear someone and to really listen to them. I think Heather has another question. Heather?
Okay, the question is, when this all blows over.
When this all blows over, I assume you're talking about the virus and not Rainbow and I? Okay. Is there any chance you will
do a workshop or a class about LGBTQ?
A workshop or a class about LGBTQ?
Yeah. I mean, it's a topic that I think is important and love to talk about
and explore for sure. Well, and one of the things that we were on the verge of starting here, we had already talked about it, was a support group for transgender. Because I think that's really important, because transgender is really, those individuals are really feeling the distancing right now, or yes, go ahead. Follow-up question to the first one.
Say the divine feminine is creative and nurturing, but is it also receptive? There's a big long paragraph. Do you want to repeat that part?
So say it again. You want to repeat?
I'll repeat. The divine feminine is creative and nurturing, but is it also receptive?
Is there a way to use this time of separation?
Is there a way to use this time of separation to actually connect and receive
in a way that can transform the energy of fear that is so prevalent?
In a way that can transform the energy of fear that is so prevalent right now. I said it, but I don't know if I cognized it.
Let me read it all the way through once.
Okay,
I think we got it. I think
you got it.
Creative and nurturing. But is it also receptive?
Okay.
Is there a way to use this time of separation to actually connect and receive in a way that can transform the energy of fear that is so prevalent right now?
Yeah. Want to go first?
Well, first of all, I was going to say that separation is a perception.
Yeah.
That regardless of what's happening, we're never disconnected from the one. Now, we are physically not connecting with our tribe, I'll say, because we're used to going and doing and having and all of that without restrictions. So one of the things that I think is really, really important is the idea that fear cannot live where love is present. Hate cannot live where love is present. So translating love into the world. For example, I'm a spiritual realist, so I think that it's about action. I think it's about what you do in the world, how you bring your spirituality, your love, your gifts into the world. So, just simply going to the store and looking into the clerk's eyes and saying, I so appreciate you. I know that you are getting all kinds of individuals in here with all kinds of emotions, and I just want you to know that I really appreciate you. And doing that with people that we really know that are struggling right now. How can I help you? That's one of the best questions that I think we can ask one another is, how can I help? Because sometimes we don't know. We don't know how to help. And that's part of nurturing, is how can I help? Listening is part of nurturing. Showing people that you care and you appreciate them, all part of nurturing. And you never know what that one question or that one, how can I help, or I really appreciate, you never know how that affects the other person. But you do know how it affects you. How do you feel when you say that? When you genuinely care for someone else, or you genuinely care for, like, I have to go back to our governor again. I love this man. I got a man crush on him, really.
Totally.
I swear. I mean, he is like, the first thing he says is, we're in this together. And you can feel that that love coming from him, that he really cares, Do you want to say something about that?
I'll say I was moved about last week. I went into Trader Joe's and I was scanning the chocolate section, which is right by the register. I was there probably for like 10 minutes.
Of course.
Trying to find the best chocolate with the least amount of sugar for the best price. It's a lot of factors. And while I was there, a number of people were like, we can take you over here. I'm like, no, I'm just looking at the chocolate. But I overheard the, 3 people or so checking out, and the cashiers, they were, just so loving and asking, so how are you doing with all this? And then I overheard a conversation of someone saying they just came in town for a memorial service, and then all this hit. This was like a little over a week ago when it kind of just hit. And they're just kind of, and they didn't have any supplies or anything. And the woman working at Trader Joe reaches underneath and says, do you need some hand sanitizers? And was offering her, and then when I got up there, she's like, so how are you doing with all this? And, what line of work are you in? Have you been affected? Are you still working? And so I shared a little bit of what I do. And she was, thanking me for being this, for what I am doing, and thanking her for what she's doing. And it was just, my heart was just so opened by that sense of connection and interaction that normally you wouldn't have at a grocery store. Yeah.
And I think that right now, with the way the economy and everything is going, some of the suggestions have been like to buy gift certificates from restaurants so that you can use them later, or gift certificates from your hairdresser, ordering online, having it delivered, pick it up, continuing to really just, it's really kind of amazing when I think about it, how we're in this really scary time in our lives, and yet people are stepping up. People are coming together. People are really caring about one another. It's a pretty amazing time when you think about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I could get triggered by the one story on Facebook about somebody, hoarding hand sanitizer, but then I just can breathe and look at the, hundreds of other stories of people sharing and giving and connecting. So again, it comes back to what are we paying attention to, and what are we choosing to energize and focus on, and what are those seeds that we're planting in that, receptive nature of the universe that is known as the divine feminine. What are those seeds that we're planting into that soil that are being birthed in this beautiful time of spring? It's really calling us to be, I think, a lot more intentional and aware of our actions, and our actions as a collective towards the whole planet and all of humanity. So I think there really is some beauty in what is occurring.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have time for one more question.
Any other questions?
Out there?
Last call.
Oh,
got one in the house. Lauren. Yes.
Back on the topic of gender and sexuality, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to be an ally or show support, or even ask a question, but is afraid that they don't know the right language and might offend unintentionally?
That is a great question. Someone who wants to be an ally, how can they show support if they're worried about using the wrong language? You know, it's a great question, because some of the things that hold us back is we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. We don't want to look stupid. We're afraid that we're going to say the wrong thing, and how that, you know, and what happens with that is it makes it about you.
Yeah.
And so the real question is, can I walk through that fear and simply ask and learn from that question? I really want to learn. So I'm just going to ask you, you know, whatever the question may be. So will you teach me? Will you help me? Because I want to be your ally. And I think if someone came up to me and said that, I would let's have a conversation.
Yes, yeah.
This is great. This is great. So don't let your fear keep you from asking the questions. Don't let you're worried about how will I look if I ask this question, or, you know, and thank you so much for that. I'm so glad that you asked that question.
And I think it comes across with the way you ask too, you know, so if you acknowledge, like, I notice I'm a little nervous asking this, and you kind of state your intention. First of all, your intention will be felt. If you're coming from a place of love and curiosity, that will just be felt. But if you feel more comfortable acknowledge, I feel a little nervous, but I'm just, you know, I'm wanting to know you better and understand better. Can I ask you a question about blah, 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 you know, and then ask the question. And it's so different than if somebody were to ask a question out of judgment, you know.
Yeah.
And I really believe that's how we learn, is asking and having conversations. And back to that question on, will we do some kind of workshop or offering? I think the most effective thing would be some kind of panel where we have different people share from their own experience. So it's not just like one person, because no one is an expert on the topic. What I shared earlier was literally from my perspective, my experience, and it doesn't represent everyone that it identifies even in the same way I do. So I think, you know, perhaps it's something we can create a panel discussion where we have people with various identities willing to share and answer those questions, and creating that safe container for those questions from allies that just don't know but want to be a support to ask the questions in that space.
And that's something that we could absolutely do online.
We could do it online.
Yeah,
totally.
We could do it online. I think our time is coming to a close. Right. We're having so much fun.
I know, right?
It's like hard to...
We could just talk all day.
We could. At least I could.
What comes next?
What comes next? Let's look and see. I think it's prayer.
We pray.
So let's invite Lauren up here. Would you like to start us off this time?
I will. So taking a moment to again take that breath. So grateful to be present right here, right now. Acknowledging the one life that expresses itself in the many. Knowing that this one life is love. This universal isness that is creativity, that is peace, that is wholeness. Knowing that this one life is all that there is, I know that it is who I am. That I am one with all. And so therefore, this love, this peace, this wholeness is the very essence of my being. And I know this to be true for each and every being, that we are all one. And that this thing called life is having its way right here, right now, expressing itself as the many. So grateful to be a creative, divine expression of the one life, acknowledging all the unique ways that life expresses through each individual, honoring the divine masculine, the divine feminine, and anything in between that is that essence of life. Knowing that I fully embody all of me, and that it feels wonderful to be a full expression of this thing called life. in all the ways that life gets to be expressed in, as, and through me. So as I speak this word for myself, and I know for each and every one of us, that we are truly free. We are free to be, free to express, free to know and to explore this thing called life in this physical form, in this physical world. Knowing love, knowing wholeness, knowing joy and peace, and simply being present and being a divine, full expression of life. And I pass my word to Reverend Soni.
Lying open to the infinite in this moment, right here and right now, I know that diversity does not mean sameness. I know that right here and right now, in this moment, that all is unfolding as that divine order that is spirit, is the universal isness of all things. Knowing that no matter where anyone is, God is right here and right now. And that if someone is in need of prayer today, I stand in the gap. Knowing and declaring and anchoring in that all is unfolding exactly the way it is supposed to unfold, regardless of any fear or lack or limitation that may be circulating in the world right now. Regardless of any of that, that there is only love, and that God has no favorites, that God does not condemn, that God does not know fear, that God does not know anything other than love. And so I know right here and right now that what we are seeking, what anyone is seeking, what this community is seeking, whether it is peace or love or joy or abundance and prosperity, that it is the truth that it is seeking all of us. What we are seeking is seeking all of us. And so I know in this moment that all of it unfolds in the power and the grace that is the Holy Self. Whether we label it or call it the divine feminine or the divine masculine, it is simply spiritual being, human being, loving, letting go and surrendering into that knowingness that there is only one power and one source. And that power and that source is right here, right now. And for this, I am so grateful. I'm so grateful to know that there is only one, and that my source does not rely on anything outside of me, as I know that it doesn't rely on anything outside of anyone else. That the source of all things is right here in my heart, in my soul, in my mind. And nothing, not the economy, not some virus, not any of that, can take away from me who I am. Who I am as that living, loving expression of the one. And so I give great thanks to know this truth as I stand in the power of grace, knowing that the law always says yes. I release this word into that perfect universal law, standing in the place of grace by saying Shalom, Hamdalela, Ashe, Namaste. This prayer is done. I leave it knowing it is so. And so it is. Amen.